Hey, what's up, guys? We're here with Chris Burkard joining us from Iceland. Chris, first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I just feel I feel like it's new stage of life being over here and new perspectives and a whole new onslaught of things to share and chat about and kind of think about for sure.
Okay, let's look back to last time we talked. You were still in Pismo Beach. You had the old studio. A lot has changed. You're
Yeah.
in Iceland now. Look back to what that is and where you are now, and what is your mindset and your perspective, and how has that changed?
Oh man, it hit me right away with the hard questions. Um, it's I think that not much has changed. I will say that. I mean, the way that I operate my business and the way that I'm trying to, figure things out and still get after it every way I can is hasn't changed. I think at a certain point, what I realize is that the more comfortable you get in any career, in any career path, it just seems like you end up becoming less and less inclined to kind of follow your passions, right? And I feel at times like, I've gotten on, the stage at TED and I've spoken on about a more podcasts than I can literally remember or count. And I've expressed the importance and the need for people to go out and seek their own, sense of finding themselves and adventure and whatever you want to call it, and just getting outside your comfort zone. And I feel like at a certain point you have to just stop and look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, am I taking my own advice? And that's tough, like that's a really hard thing. It's a hard pill to swallow. And the answer is yes, and no. Of course, I am, you know, and I always will be pursuing those things that make me feel like I'm growing and learning. But am I also just trying to exist in a way that makes me feel the most comfortable? And I know from experience, just me personally, that I don't thrive in that space. I thrive in a space where I feel like I'm being challenged. I feel like I'm entertaining, the entirety of my being, my mind, my body, my spirit, whatever. And so that is why I moved, because I felt like this was a place that called me, and this is a place where I felt happiest, and this is a place that asks a lot of me. It doesn't make total sense. It's not super, straightforward. It's challenging. It's made me, rethink every aspect of life. And I feel like that's sort of what you need sometimes, a swift kick in the ass to kind of remember why you do what you do. And so that's the short answer of it. And I would say that, to kind of summarize the other aspect of why I'm here, is that I have two young boys. They're 9 and 11, and I'm a parent, and that's really important to me. Beyond being a photographer and filmmaker and whatnot, and their safety is critical. And I feel like moving them to the safest country in the world is something that I would be, I'd be lying to you if I said that wasn't a factor. So
What if you look back to the beginning of your career? What would you say is like your quote unquote big break?
yeah, people love to ask that question. They love it.
Yeah.
They love this idea that maybe there's a singular, you know, Herculean moment that happened. And the truth is, like, I have no clue. There was never a big break. There was never a single, and maybe if there was, I was just too blind to maybe what that was. I would say that looking back and reflecting has been absolutely crucial in my life and in my career. And I've looked back and seen moments where I'm like, wow, that was a really significant kind of milestone that set me up for success. Publishing my first book was an incredible big break, but it's such a weird thing because it was a 3 year process. It was a
Mm.
glacial process, as I like to call it. Like, books move so slowly, and so when you're in it, nothing feels that significant, and the results from it don't come fast. So I don't really know anybody personally who had one single moment where they took this photo and everything changed, or they had this image published. It's slow, is what I'm saying. So I would say that looking back, The example that I can think of is not so much that, single pinpoint moment, but publishing my first book was crucial. And it wasn't so much about the publishing of the book, it was about where my work was able to be seen. And at the time, I was, I have to paint the picture because it won't make sense if I don't. But I was a surf photographer working for Surfer Magazine, traveling, going to places for the magazine. That was it. That was the entirety of my career and life. And when I had that book published, the California Surf Project, which was a 50-day documentation of traveling up and down the California coast, my images started to show up in like Barnes and Noble and Urban Outfitters and some mom and pop wine shop up and down the coast. And the point was is that people started to see it that had never seen it before. And I realized only years later, like 5, 6 years later, that that was the critical change that my career needed to kind of go from maybe one tier of success to like the next one, because
Mm.
I was already like doing what I loved and I was successful, I guess. um Looking back now, that like, minimal amount of money I was making
Yeah.
that wouldn't even
Right.
pay for like anything. But at the time I didn't need a lot, and so I felt like I was finding success, but that was the thing that propelled me into the next phase. And what's interesting is that nowadays I seek those things out. Like I made a children's book because I wanted to first and foremost write a story for my kids, and secondly I wanted to kind of keep that mindset of trying to get my work in front of new audiences, and it's why I've made films about what I've made films about. It's why I've addressed certain subjects, is because I don't want to be pigeonholed. And I think that those opportunities to get in front of new people, have new people see your work, has been crucial. And it's actually brought in a lot of commercial work for me because companies have seen it in brands and whatnot as well.
With people who like look at what you're doing or look at outdoor photography, landscape photography, kind of this documentational style photography, looking
Mhm.
at that and
Yeah.
saying, I want to do that. With them in mind, is there anything that you do differently along the way to maybe give advice to those people? And obviously so many things have changed from that point to where we are right now.
Was the question was if people are documentary photographers wanting to migrate into a different format? I sort of
Yeah,
lost the
yeah.
question within the question.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
If people are, they're just kind of like trying to figure out, they love being outside, documenting their adventures, but they want to do that full time.
Right,
If
right.
they want to kind of like jet propel themselves, I guess I should say, even though it is a glacial experience, as you said, what can they do to kind of do that?
I wouldn't know. That's the thing, is like, this is kind of what it always comes down to, is like I I spent my 10,000 hours shooting. I
Mm,
shot my first 10,000 photos and I don't even think I knew, what it even meant to have a personal style or a personal, you know, genre. I would say that you can absolutely just, if somebody wants to propel their career, just go on Instagram and do all the same stuff everybody else is doing, just copy everybody else. That's great. But that won't be the thing that's going to get you out of bed in the middle of the night excited to
mm,
do what you to shoot photographs. Like, you have to have passion, you have to have unbridled passion and in your career. And I would say that I know a lot of people who have done what I just said, which is like to, pick up a camera and think that the next stage, is to, get a social media account. And I just don't see how that is going to sustain you long term. Like, I don't shoot photographs because I feel like it gives me notoriety. I do it because it gives me joy, and because telling those stories gives me joy. So I don't have a recipe for success that will help somebody propel themselves. I think that if being outside and documenting what you're seeing is gives you joy, then I would say lean into that as hard as you can. Only at the point that you're experiencing things, places, people, or creating work that you really feel is worth talking about, worth sharing, that's when I would lean into social media as a tool to, sort of propel that work, because that's really what it should be. It should be an extension of what you're doing to um, and how you see the world, right? If it's the other way around, I think that it's going to severely impact kind of the I guess the moral standing upon how you operate as an artist. And I would say that if I was kind of trying to give myself advice 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would have just advised myself to maybe not do as much of the work that I thought was going to make my editors happy. The stuff that I
Mm,
was shooting and doing to simply, you know, keep kind of the machine, moving forward. And because I realized that the moment that I started to pursue projects, stories, photographs, places, locations, that were giving me more excitement, more passion, I found more success in my career, mainly because stuff felt different. And for me, that took me to the Arctic, and it took me to places like Norway and Iceland, Alaska, and to search for waves and surf and stories. And that was very much against the grain of what kind of the media at the time was entertaining, right? So
mm.
so I think what I'm getting at is like you have to follow your own path, and um, and that's important. And whatever that path looks like, and I just it's tough for me to kind of in some ways even look at photography as sort of like another day job or another
Sure.
alternative kind of, because I know the amount of struggle and passion it
Yeah.
takes. And I mean, on a more like cynical note, I would say like you want to really propel yourself to the top of the game. Just get really really good at being denied. Get really really good
Mm,
at criticism, because
true.
you are going to have to put yourself out there so much more than you ever imagine and get shut down. And the sooner that you learn to accept and take criticism in a good way, and actually hear it and not become, you know, whatever, upset, the more successful, and you'll find more success you'll find in this career path. I mean, it took me a long time to sort of listen to that and adhere to that.
I would say kind of the echo that the more comfortable you are with the discomfort, the more
Mhm.
successful you'll be. And honestly, the happier
Sure.
you'll be in the process.
Yeah, I totally agree.
When
Took the
you
words
look
right
at
out of my
your
mouth.
yeah, when you look at your experience, what about it just all encapsulating, what about it brings you the most joy?
In my job career now, or just like life in general, because I feel like they're
Life
different.
well, true. Life photo wise, just going out on adventures.
Like photo wise, going out on
Yeah,
adventures. See, this is the
yeah.
thing, is like those are different things. I don't
Okay,
I
why?
don't
How?
aspire I don't aspire to bring a camera everywhere I go.
Okay,
Most
why?
of life's most intimate experiences, I don't think, need to be documented all the time.
Okay,
And I feel like the way that I see it is like, this is a good enough device to
okay.
capture and share most of life's really intimate moments. Um, for me, when I'm taking a camera, it often has kind of transformed into something different. It's not just like I got a point and shoot film camera and I'm going out there on assignment. You're schlepping a bag full of gear, oftentimes more gear than you want, and you're going somewhere remote. And so what that does is it creates a lot of filters, and sort of a lot of barriers in terms of having like a very vulnerable, unique experience. And I guess what I'm getting at is that I know there is a fine line between the two. There's a way to achieve both. But for me, going out and shooting something that is a legitimate commercial assignment, I'm not really going with the expectation like I'm going to leave with some kernel of truth being bestowed upon me from nature,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And yet, that's what I love the most in life, is being able to go out with my kids and experience something, or go out and do an expedition, or whatever, go ride my bike. I don't know. Um, so when I get the chance to combine the two, I feel like I'm oftentimes on more of a personal project. I'm out there. I'm doing to do some kind of a bike ride through a remote, wild area, and what I'm taking with me is a very minimal kit. Sometimes it's an Sony RX 100 point and shoot. Sometimes it's an Xperia smartphone because it's got a 1-inch sensor. Sometimes it's a GoPro. Um, often more often than not, it's not a DSLR or a mirrorless
Right.
camera or the A7 V with the, I mean, I don't need that stuff. And what is fascinating to me is that some of my better known images and better known work has been shot with like prosumer bodies because it's just
Mhm.
what I had at the time and it's what I actually cared about using and it's what I was willing to use. And I think I said this before on the podcast, but I think that the best camera is not the one you have with you, it's the one you're willing to pull out in the moment. Because if you have an A1 in the bottom of your backpack and you don't want to put that, heavy backpack down to get it out, what's the point of having it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Are you happier as a minimal person?
Oh my God, absolutely. But I feel like life just continues to pile on more and more um, things and needs, and I have a gear closet that's like, it's feels like a small REI. So I mean,
Right.
I feel like every day I'm trying to throw something away.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there would be many people who would gladly accept those pieces of gear. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a thing at my office called the free bin, and basically it's just like stuff that has accrued over time or it's left over from shoots, and I basically just give it to my crew, and I'm constantly like just trying to minimize what I have. And I genuinely feel like if I wasn't doing what I was doing for a living and sort of not only running a team in a production studio, but also operating as a photographer, and I would probably very much be like a proper minimalist, with
Right.
next to nothing.
I want to do a new segment with you for the podcast called Essential Non-Essential. And this is
Mm,
kind of taking the idea of what it would take right now to
mm,
become a photographer full time,
mm.
not just hobbyist. That good?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
All right. Essential, non-essential websites.
Yeah, website is still very much an essential
Why
piece,
would you
I
say
think.
that?
I feel like there are a multitude of ways to get to know somebody that you're going to hire, right?
Mm,
And I don't personally, for me, I don't put all of my like commercial work on social media. I know that I feel like what's not being said is like, is it the website or is it social media? And I think both are important, but the difference here is that back, 15 years ago, I remember, you know, creative directors from brands, we would have conversations and when they were choosing somebody who was going to potentially work or represent this brand or be an ambassador, whatever it is, or like, who knows, Honda was going to, feature you. Um, you know, one of the things that they would look at is like, does this photographer have a Facebook or does this photographer um, have a, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Love you. Um, does this photographer have uh, a blog or something like that? And like, are they keeping it up to date? Because the biggest thing that they said would be a red flag is like, is this person not actually consistent? And if they're not consistent, then why are they doing it? Right. And so I feel like to me, like the website is one thing, it's this static thing. It doesn't need to change. And I don't know if you noticed, but I've noticed this pretty intently is that there was a time when websites were getting like crazy. It was like, oh, I got a
yeah.
website, and then here's my blog on my website, and then
Yeah.
here's the about me, and then it was kind of like this thing where you'd go there and you could really dive in and learn more, and people would have like expedition journals and all that stuff. And I think now that has gone away because social media has taken its place. This is the place where we get to know
Mm,
somebody and we get to
mhm.
kind of hear, the day to day and all that stuff. So I guess I would say that both still hold a place. And I think a website is a static piece where if somebody really wants to come and get to know you a little more, they could go there and they could learn about you, or this is the place where you might share some of your accolades or share some of the more deep commercial work that you've done that maybe you're not really proud to put online. So I think it's crucial. I just think that also too, it's you know social media is kind of like a garbage can with no bottom. So stuff is going to go in there and it's never going to fill up and
Sure.
it's never going to be finished. So you can't expect somebody to scroll way, way, way down to see everything you've ever done and really get a grasp of who you are.
Okay, essential, non-essential, and piggybacking off of that, documentation of exploration, I'll say.
Mm.
Um, is that essential or non-essential?
I think absolutely documentation of exploration is essential.
More than people usually do?
Yeah, but I think that, see, my version of exploration is very different than maybe yours or maybe somebody else's. And so when I'm going somewhere to explore, it's oftentimes a very new place, or it's beautiful,
Okay.
or it has the core tenets of what exploration I think should be, which is either a internal personal journey to learn something about yourself, or it is an actual physical journey to a place that has not been explored. And so I think that those things merit documentation, and especially new places that haven't been seen. I mean, I think that's the great joy of having an eye and a camera is that you get to see something and bring it back to people. So to me, like, I think that that is literally the very best use case for a camera ever.
Essential, non-essential moments to reset yourself and your mind
Mm.
and your passions.
Absolutely essential to the thousandth degree. I think that there is nothing more important than finding a place of solace where you can restore your creative juices and energy and excitement around whatever it is that you do. Um, I would say that every person only has so much of a capacity. Your well, I often refer to it as, your well of water that you're taking
Mm,
sort of buckets out of. That's usually what you're doing when you're on a job or an assignment. You're sort of giving to other people. You're a producer, or you're a director, or you're shooting and you're managing people, or you're kind of offering of yourself all the time. You know, and at a certain point that well runs dry. So I always ask people, like, what do you do to fill up your well? Like, what does that look like? And don't tell me it's photography. Don't tell me it's like, I'm gonna go shoot more. Like, I understand that brings joy, but is there anything else? Is there any other option? So I feel like that's really important.
how often are you doing that?
More often than you think.
Yeah, okay.
um, every single day. I mean, every single day. Every single day that I'm not working, and I mean, I don't consider this work. This is fun. Like, this is what
Right.
I'm doing for fun, right? I mean, I would say that this is a filling up of the well, because it's me being able to share information or knowledge or life's experiences. I'm not holding a camera and I'm not stressed out trying to micromanage or whatever. So I would say that every day I try to find a moment where I can do that. Today I went ski touring and went skiing for a couple hours with a friend, um and then I went to the hot tub, and now I'm here.
That's not a bad way. It's not a bad way to go about
No, no.
it. We've talked about like the workload and also resetting that we just talked about. Let me ask you this, and it could be relative from person to person. What kind of a
Okay.
mindset does it take to be a professional
Mm.
photographer?
Oh, it's a good question. I I think it takes all kinds of mindsets. There are the type A's, the type B's. There are
Mm,
every type of person is what I'm getting at. There are the people who use social media. I know I come back to this example, but it's a good way to decipher. Um, who really love the connectivity with other people, who see it as
mhm,
a glorified texting app, who
mhm.
genuinely care about the reciprocation of thoughts and ideas, and love it. And then there are some people who see it as an absolute chore and know that they don't really want to be out in the limelight. They don't really want to be, you know, talking to people. And so they kind of just share stuff and then, like, go back into recluse mode. Both are fine. Um, I would say, you know, with photography, and to be a professional photographer at the highest degree, not, and I don't want to, alienate anybody or say, like,
Sure.
that there's a certain type, that doesn't that doesn't adhere to the same standards. But there's a difference, I think, between maybe somebody who is shooting senior pictures and then somebody who is trying to manage like a 60-person crew
Okay.
on a
Mhm.
beach somewhere, whatever, who knows. But I would say that it does require strong management skills, and I would say like an understanding of how to interpret and read people, and most of the time, if you're working with clients, and again, if you're a Nat Geo photographer going out shooting frogs in the middle of the Amazon, maybe you aren't dealing with the same types of situations. But if you are somebody who is working with clients or shooting jobs where there are expectations and people and stuff you have to manage, right? Shooting a film, you need to be really aware. You need to be a people person. I think you need to be somebody who can interpret the needs of those you're working with and be very sensitive to that. There is an
Mm.
element of, I think, vulnerability that's required, a good element of communication that I think goes a long way. It's not a necessity, but I think it really helps. And I would say that the people out there who can at times, find that elusive balance between like the sort of um, artistry and I guess, the financial business side of it. That to me is the trickiest thing, because I think all of us can understand that you can just, if you were just being thrust into being an artist and that was your whole focus, I think that's the funnest part of it, right? Nobody really wants to
Right.
think about managing people and paying bills and living in two different countries and there are two different tax, you know, codes. So I mean, point being is like I think that is the real recipe for finding a lot of success, is being able to marry those two things, and it's not always super possible.
Personally, for you, how has your mindset and your personality helped you to succeed?
Oh well, it's changed over the years. Like I don't think
Okay.
that I'm the same person that I was when I started this career path
Sure.
20, almost 15, 16 years ago. um, I was very much like, I will sacrifice sleep, health, friends, everything you can imagine to be successful and to be the best and to be whatever. I was out, you know, a man on fire, ready to prove to the world. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that how I grew up and my upbringing and sort of who I was as a person without getting into the details of that. But I
Right.
think as I've kind of gotten older and done some therapy and some self work, I've realized that like I don't need to be that person. I can still maintain really strong friendships, and I can still maintain like health, and I can still maintain a sense of awareness of what my own body needs. And because like I mean, I remember vividly like being on shoots where I was like waking up in the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, having anxiety attacks, like feeling my hair like thinning, or I was like, going through it and like pulling out clumps of hair and being like, what's
Yeah.
going on? I'm 25 years old. Like, how in the world am I experiencing this? And so I guess what I'm saying is like, I realize what it does, it can ask of you if
Mhm.
you give it that. But but I think that now I'm just trying to work a bit smarter and not harder, right? To
Okay.
be a bit more intelligent, because I would like to do this for the rest of my life and not just
Sure.
you know burn out in my 30s. That would be ideal. And I also like enjoy living life. And I read a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, and that book probably was the single most important like factor in looking at how I operate now, how I operate my
Why is
business
that?
now. And just because it asks certain questions. It's basically
Uh-huh.
like it's the best book I've ever written. I've read it like 3 or 4 times. I've suggested it to thousands of people, and I know it's changed a lot of people's lives. And I would also say that it what it does is it just asks very poignant questions about what you should be spending your time on, what is actually essential in your life. It's kind of like a self-analysis of maybe
Mm,
where our efforts are best used. And the whole book is about doing less but doing better, right? And I think
right.
that for most of us, we take on more than we should. And what ends up happening is that out of those things that we take on, quite a few of them suffer. So yeah, it's kind of that book that really poses that question, like, just because you have the opportunity to do something doesn't really mean you should, and
Mm,
did you ever stop to ask if you should? Did you
mm,
always just take it, because it was there? And coming from like a, blue collar background where I watched my parents struggle to like make money and wanted to like never have that same fear or issue, I feel like I just, you know, became a workaholic, and that's really tough to accept and to kind of internalize and to break the habit.
well, I mean, you and I have probably both seen it happen to other photographers several times. You mentioned the word burnout, taking on too much, trying to do it all.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. When is the right time to, I don't want to say like hire somebody because not
Yeah.
everybody is in that situation where they can afford to do that, but let's say
Right.
outsource some of your efforts and some of your work.
That's an excellent question. I actually have a pretty like straightforward answer for this too.
Okay.
It's the moment that you feel like there are enough requests or enough
Mm,
asks of your time that you cannot fulfill all of them.
mhm,
But asterisk here, like it's not about just because there are opportunities. It's because you are actually losing money
mm,
because you are not fulfilling those. So like for me, what did that look like? It looked like I was on a shoot. I was on a trip somewhere, and I remember a magazine reaching out and being like, "We have this photo of yours. Like, we need the high res. Can you send it over? It's for the cover." And I was like, "Oh my god! Like, I'm not back for 5 days, and I missed the opportunity." And I was like, "That's ridiculous. Like, I'm never going to let that happen again." And so I didn't hire somebody. What I did was I trained somebody on how to use my system. It was just a friend. It was like somebody that I knew, and I was like, "Hey, if something comes up, can I call you so you can go send this image to whoever?" Because this was before. I mean, they were. It was probably out, but before like remote access to computers,
right.
and all that. But realistically, I was in places where I couldn't have even really used that anyway. So I needed to have somebody where I could like forward them an email and be like, "Go to my office or go to my computer, you know, and send this file."
Mhm,
Right. And so that's how it started. And I would just pay that person hourly. I'd pay whatever, 20 bucks an hour. I don't know, and if you're getting a cover that's worth 300-400 bucks, like it kind of makes a lot of sense. The
sure.
hard part is just training that person and taking that time. And I think what I realized is that after I trained that person, I was like, well, this is pretty convenient. They know how my system works. Right. And I started to find other stuff. I'm like, oh, can you help organize these images? Can you do this? And then all of a sudden I started shooting jobs where I was, shooting thousands and thousands of images. You go shoot an automotive shoot where you're shooting thousands of plates for a
Mm,
car,
mm,
where they're going to potentially like superimpose this thing in there. You better hope that you're not the one doing the post processing for that, because that's going to consume weeks of your time. And so I realized very quickly, I'm like, I can't continue to take on more jobs or more work. If that was the case right now, I would still be editing a job that we shot like 3 months ago because we're so
yeah,
backed up. Right.
yeah.
So I hired a photo editor, and I hired somebody who could kind of go through, and basically I would set the look and they would go through and they would start processing these images. And ultimately these assistants or assisting roles became part-time, then full-time. And that was a very slow process. I mean, it wasn't like I just all of a sudden hired 5 employees. I hired one person, as a very part-time situation. And then that became, more and more and more. So
If I were to ask, and I did this, I asked several people to give me a word that they would relate to you. All kind things came back, by the way. Uh,
oh
the
God,
two the two most
that's
common
hilarious.
ones were inspiring and motivating.
Mm,
How does that make you feel
that's
hearing those two words associated with your influence on them?
I mean, if I'm going to be honest, it makes me
Yeah.
feel a bit um, like a little bit imposter syndrome,
Why?
um, uh, because I'm always seeking for inspiration myself,
Okay.
and people would imagine, maybe I might be putting words in their mouth, but they might imagine that, oh man, Chris is, he's got the he's got the direct connect to a line of inspiration, or
Mm,
he's mainlining inspiration. I don't know, but the truth is, like, I'm seeking it out myself. Like, I need that thing, that project,
mm,
that that gets me excited, that gets me up in the morning, that makes me want to go train or go pull out my camera or go do whatever. So it's something I'm really grateful to be able to kind of share with other people,
yeah.
and I guess bestow upon people in some way. And it's in some ways, like, shocking. I honestly don't think that at when I started this career, or when I was a little kid, for example, I never in a million years thought that the things that I would be doing would be like motivating or inspiring other people, or I don't know, or anything like that. I didn't think people would even see what I was doing. So it still feels surreal.
I think it goes back to, in your answer, goes back to what you were talking about with the well. You probably sometimes feel like you're putting so much out there in the effort of pushing stuff out and inspiring people, but at the same time, you need to receive that yourself.
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, I think that nowadays, maybe more than ever, and that's this might be kind of hard to fully articulate, but I feel like my appetite is greater.
Mm, okay.
Um, like if if somebody was like, "Hey, do you want to go to Alaska?" Like, free trip, it's going to be great, all expenses paid. I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm good. I've done that. Like, I'm not. It's I don't really. I have responsibilities. I can't just bail and go somewhere fun." But I guess what I'm saying is, like, nowadays I have to really filter things through a different lens. I'm a parent. I've got responsibilities. My crew. As much as I would love to gallivant around the world, I don't really get that privilege. And also, too, I moved myself to a place that I felt was more
Mm,
inspiring.
mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I think my appetite is a little bigger in some ways, and that's hard coming from somebody who, like, wants to be a minimalist and wants to not have so many needs.
Right. I want to split this question, this, and we'll land the
Mhm.
plane with this. We'll finish off with this question, but I want to split it into
Mhm.
two categories, because you've already said that your life is kind of in two different sections, right?
Yes.
So, what kind of legacy do you hope to leave behind with your photography?
Ah. Well, if you were just saying in general, like,
Mm,
I would say I just want to do things that my kids are proud of, and
okay.
I want to leave behind. I mean, photography is a weird one because, like, I don't even really like, the things that I'm most proud of are probably the films that we've made, because I think they
Okay.
address more deep and meaningful topics. So I'd say, as a storyteller, if I can just kind of insert that into your
Sure.
words, I would just say I want to leave behind images, films, stories that are going to be around a lot longer than I am. I would say that's kind of like what, you know, Ansel Adams, aspired to
Mhm.
do, and his work has outlasted him, and my hope is that maybe some of mine will. I don't really know, um, but I would say that it's a really hard thing to think about,
Yeah.
like, because here and now, that might also be kind of counter intuitive, or just counter in general to, like, what you're doing to make a living or to make money.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, if you're like, I want to create images that are going to, last, stand the test of time. It's like, well, does it, how did that, catalog campaign you shot for Prana, like,
Yeah.
do that? I don't know. So I think it's a matter of thinking through the projects that are important and meaningful,
Okay.
and making sure that they're something that will last.
I asked that question to a film photographer one time, and he said, "Man, I'm just leaving behind a bunch of film in my garage for my family to clean out." When you take it away from like storytelling and the business side, and you move it over
Mhm.
into you as a person,
Mm,
dad, husband, what do you hope that legacy
mm.
is?
I mean, that's harder to answer, but I
Mm,
would say that
sure.
I, um, I never want to give my kids some inherent fear of the unknown or
Mm,
a fear of anything, because just because I grew up with my own predispositions to things I'm afraid of, I don't want them to live with that. I want them to find their own, path. I want them to realize that they're, me as a person, or me as a person who inspires other people or motivates people, is somebody who actually lived up to what they preached, and their words, and actually, you know, made the hard decisions, moved away from a perfect life in California and a perfect studio, and to pursue something different and something that
mhm.
feels like it's the very best way of seeing the world. So I guess that's kind of what I want to inspire them to do, is just make sure that they like follow their path wherever that takes them, regardless if it's terrifying.
Well, he's Chris Burkard. Chris, thank you so much for joining us and talking with us.
Dude, thank you, bro. Appreciate it as always.